New Orleans in June is a place that hums. The air feels thick like honey, slow-moving and sweet, sticking to your skin and pulling secrets from the shadows. On the edge of the French Quarter, with its cracked sidewalks and iron balconies dripping with flowers, a newlywed couple checked into the Belrose Hotel. Jamal and Tasha Wright, both 29, both glowing, both exhausted, had just said, "I do" 3 days ago back in Atlanta. And now they were here, on their honeymoon. The city was supposed to be a place of fresh starts. Jazz, gumbo, second lines, and slow dancing. But the city felt off. Not just the weather, there was something else. Something watching. Jamal worked in finance, buttoned up, the kind of man who planned for everything. Tasha was in early childhood education, radiant, sharp, with a voice that always carried a tune. They had been together 5 years, survived COVID layoffs, a miscarriage, and a long engagement everyone questioned. Still, they'd made it to the altar. But what guests didn't know, what even Tasha didn't know, was that for the last 6 months, Jamal had been harboring a dangerous truth. One that followed them to the hotel suite with the king-sized bed and champagne on ice. Marcus Hale, the best man, was already in New Orleans when the couple arrived. That was no accident. The three of them had been close for years. Marcus was family, practically a brother to Jamal, and Tasha adored him. But Jamal and Marcus had shared more than laughs over whiskey. Their connection had turned physical one night after a bachelor party, then emotional, and then tangled in something neither man had the courage to name. Shame, love, confusion. It didn't matter now. What mattered was that they were both here, and nothing could stay buried forever. The first day passed quietly. The trio grabbed drinks at Carousel Bar, laughed over oysters at Felix's. But behind Jamal's tight smile was a growing dread. Tasha was talking about baby names again. Marcus kept texting cryptic messages. "We need to talk." Jamal's phone buzzed all night. His lies were stacking up like cards in a tower. By the second night, the mood changed. Tasha noticed. She felt the cold in Jamal's touch, the distance in his eyes. She heard him whispering on the balcony at midnight, saw the flicker of Marcus's number on his phone. But when she asked, he brushed it off with practiced calm. "Just business stuff, babe. Don't stress." The streets outside pulsed with music, but in room 312, silence was starting to scream. "If you're finding this story meaningful, we'd be grateful if you subscribe. Thank you." It started with glances. The kind that lasted a second too long. A hand brushing an arm. A private joke that no one else seemed to get. At the wedding, Marcus stood beside Jamal, grinning through clenched teeth. They looked like brothers, both tall, both sharply dressed, both with deep brown skin that caught the sun like polished stone. But inside, Marcus was unraveling. Watching the man he loved marry someone else had split him open. Jamal thought he could manage it. He thought if he said the vows loud enough, kissed the bride long enough, this other thing, this dangerous, complicated thing, would go quiet. But it didn't. It followed them. All the way to New Orleans. All the way to their honeymoon. The affair with Marcus hadn't started with seduction. It started with late-night talks after breakups. Gym sessions that got a little too close. Then one night, Marcus was there for Jamal after a fight with Tasha. They drank. They touched. And then everything changed. What was supposed to be a one-time mistake turned into hotel rooms, burner accounts, and a promise neither man could ever say out loud. This means something. Jamal told himself he'd end it after the wedding. He blocked Marcus's number. Then unblocked it. They met 2 days before the ceremony in Jamal's car, parked behind a closed barbershop. Marcus begged him not to go through with it. Jamal shook his head, silent tears streaming down his face. It's too late. But Marcus didn't leave. He booked a flight to New Orleans. Told the group chat he wanted to celebrate with the newlyweds. Told himself it would give him closure. What he really wanted was a chance to see if Jamal would break. And Jamal, he let it happen. Maybe part of him wanted to be caught. Maybe he thought Marcus would stay quiet, that they could bury it again. But Marcus wasn't quiet. Not anymore. The second night, while Tasha was taking a bath, Jamal met Marcus at the hotel bar. Marcus was drunk. Angry. "I can't keep pretending," he hissed. Jamal grabbed his arm and looked around, panicked. "Not here. Not now." Marcus leaned in close. "Then when?" A bartender noticed. Jamal noticed the bartender noticing. Tension crackled in the air. Marcus stormed off. Jamal followed 5 minutes later. Security cameras caught both exits. Neither man looked calm. Neither man looked safe. Back upstairs, Tasha was scrolling through Jamal's iPad when a notification pinged. A name she didn't recognize. A message she wasn't supposed to read. Her heart stopped. Her bathwater went cold. And somewhere in the distance, a storm rolled in. It was just a few words on a screen, but it shattered everything. I can't do this anymore. Tell her, or I will. The message came from a contact saved only as M. Tasha read it twice. 3 times. Her hands trembled, droplets of bathwater still clinging to her skin. The bathroom mirror fogged behind her as her world cracked open in quiet, terrifying silence. She wasn't naive. Marriage isn't a fairy tale. But this wasn't just a secret. This was betrayal wrapped in fear. And that fear had a name now. She clicked deeper. Old messages. Photos. Long chains of heart emojis and voice notes. Dates that overlapped with her own memories. Weekends Jamal said he was working late, canceled plans, last-minute trips. The truth hit like a punch to the chest. And not just any affair. It was Marcus, the best man, the man who toasted their love, who hugged her after the vows, who had stood beside her husband as they both swore loyalty and devotion in front of God and their families. She remembered how tight Marcus's smile was that day, how his eyes lingered too long on Jamal's face, how he avoided hers. She felt sick. When Jamal returned to the suite, he knew something was off immediately. Tasha sat still in a robe, the iPad on the bed, the screen still lit. No words. Just silence. And that silence said everything. Jamal froze. Tasha. She stood, slow and shaking. How long? He didn't answer. She didn't wait. The argument that followed wasn't loud. It was quiet rage. Sharp questions. Shattered trust. The kind of betrayal that burns low and deep. Jamal cried. He begged. He told her he didn't know what it meant, that it wasn't real, that he loved her. Tasha backed away disgusted, not just at him, but at herself for not seeing it, for trusting too easily. But then she asked the question that hung in the air like smoke. Is it over? And Jamal, tired, cornered, broken, hesitated. That hesitation changed everything. Tasha threw his phone across the room. Jamal screamed. Someone in the next room banged on the wall. The fight spilled out of the suite and into the hallway. A manager later remembered seeing them, Jamal shirtless, Tasha sobbing, mascara streaked. A perfect couple cracked open in the hallway of a boutique honeymoon hotel. Later, hotel staff said Jamal left the room around 2 a.m. alone. Angry. Eyes glassy. He walked out onto Royal Street and disappeared into the night. That was the last time anyone saw him alive. The next morning, the French Quarter woke slowly, as it always does. Sunlight spilled over wrought iron balconies. Jazz floated faintly from a distant saxophone. Street vendors opened shop, and the scent of beignet mixed with brewing coffee. Life moved on. But inside the Belrose Hotel, room 312 sat cold and quiet. Tasha was alone. The bed was untouched on one side. Jamal hadn't come back. She called him once. Then again. Straight to voicemail. She paced. She cried. She checked the lobby. The rooftop bar. Nothing. Marcus wasn't answering either. Her voice shook as she asked the concierge if they'd seen her husband. They hadn't. It wasn't until just after 11 a.m. that the first red flag appeared. Housekeeping knocked on Marcus's door, room 406, for the 3rd time. No answer. But down the hall, in the staff restroom, a maid had already found something odd. A bloodstained towel. Small but distinct. Tucked behind the trash bin like someone had tried to hide it. She reported it to security, who brushed it off. Minor. Probably someone nicked themselves shaving. Still, she remembered it. Something about the way the blood had soaked so deeply into the fabric. Like panic. Like violence. Back in room 312, Tasha opened Jamal's laptop and began calling his contacts. Friends. Family. No one had heard from him. The last message in their group chat was from the night before. A blurry photo of the 3 of them at the bar. Smiling. That was it. By noon, worry turned to dread. Tasha went to the front desk and asked to check security footage. She was denied. But a manager noted her distress and called the police, just in case. It's probably nothing, they told her. Newlywed fight, he probably needed air. But by then, the streets were already buzzing. The Belrose wasn't in a rough part of town. But the neighborhood watched everything. Locals had seen Jamal outside the night before, pacing near the corner store. One man remembered him arguing with someone, dark-skinned, tall, sounded like he was crying. He didn't get close. Didn't feel right, he said. Something about it felt doomed. Another woman, walking her dog around midnight, remembered a loud thud near the alley off Bienville Street. She thought it was just trash cans. But later, when she heard the news, she wasn't so sure. The police arrived at 1:45 p.m. They interviewed Tasha, checked the suite, filed the report. Officially, Jamal Wright was now a missing person. Unofficially, whispers had already begun to spread. By dusk, word had reached back home to Atlanta. Jamal Wright was missing in New Orleans. In a matter of hours, the story jumped from confused texts in family group chats to hushed prayer circles in living rooms. Tasha's parents drove overnight. Jamal's mother, Ms. Denise Wright, collapsed when she heard. His brother booked a flight before the call even ended. But back in the French Quarter, things were unraveling faster than anyone realized. At 6:12 p.m., a tourist from Oklahoma stopped by the Belrose front desk, visibly shaken. She said she'd overheard a disturbing fight outside the hotel's side entrance the night before. Two men, one of them crying, the other yelling. You were never supposed to tell her. She didn't get a good look, just caught the edge of the scene from her balcony. But it stayed with her. The pain in the voice. The kind of pain that doesn't just pass. Meanwhile, Marcus Hale was nowhere to be found. His room had been locked since morning. No sign of movement. Staff used a master key to enter just before sunset. The room was eerily tidy. No luggage. No clothes. Just a half-empty whiskey bottle, a single photo frame, Tasha, Jamal, and Marcus on a boat during last year's 4th of July, and a handwritten note left in the drawer. The note wasn't a confession. It was something worse. It read, "You'll never understand what it's like to hide your whole self. He said we'd be safe. He said we'd forget. But I never forgot." Detectives were now fully engaged. Missing person had turned into suspected foul play. They pulled the building's camera footage. At 1:22 a.m., Jamal was seen exiting through the back entrance, barefoot and in sweatpants. He looked frantic, his phone in one hand, something clutched in the other, possibly a keycard. 7 minutes later, Marcus was seen following the same path. Wearing a hoodie, head down. They weren't alone. A neighbor across the street, an older man named Deshawn, later told police he'd seen two shadows fighting behind the dumpsters. Said one of them yelled something like, "You ruined everything," before it went quiet. He hadn't called the cops. I figured it was just another drunk argument. But now, he couldn't shake the image. The quiet street. The flicker of the street lamp. The sudden silence. By 10 p.m., police issued a bolo for Marcus Hale. Tasha, still in shock, sat in the hotel room staring at her wedding ring. The one she hadn't taken off. Not yet. She kept replaying the message. Tell her, or I will. She wished it had all been a lie. But it wasn't. And now her husband was gone. And someone, maybe the man who stood as his best friend, was hiding something. The next morning, the air in New Orleans felt heavier. The kind of weight that presses on your chest before the day even begins. Rain tapped against the windows of the Belrose Hotel, soft but steady, as if the sky was trying to wash away something it couldn't name. At 7:08 a.m., a housekeeper named Letitia opened the door to the unoccupied room 311, just one floor below where Tasha and Jamal had stayed. She immediately smelled something metallic. Not strong, but sharp like rust and sweat. She followed the scent to the bathroom sink. There, she found the second clue no one could ignore. A torn strip of white cotton, soaked in blood, crumpled beneath the vanity. This wasn't a shaving nick. The room was supposed to be empty, but someone had been there. A closer look revealed muddy footprints near the bathroom entrance and tiny streaks of red on the door handle. Letitia backed out of the room and called security. Within an hour, police arrived. Crime scene tape went up. Room 311 was processed. The partial fingerprint on the sink was too smudged to ID. But what they did find, tiny slivers of what looked like broken plastic near the baseboard, matched the missing corner of Jamal's phone case. It confirmed one thing, Jamal had been there. But not alone. Back in the police station, a new lead was developing. Detectives had pulled Marcus's credit card activity. At 3:47 a.m., 2 hours after the altercation outside the hotel, his card had been used at a gas station 15 miles east, just off the I-10. A single transaction, $63 for fuel and a sports drink. Detectives retrieved the station's footage. The timestamp showed Marcus, hood up, pulling in with a dark blue rental car. He looked rattled, sweating, jumping at every noise. But what chilled investigators most wasn't just Marcus's demeanor. It was the fact that the car he was driving wasn't his. It was Jamal's. Police traced the rental, found it dumped behind a shuttered warehouse 2 parishes over. Mud along the tires, a cracked taillight, and in the trunk, dried blood. Not enough to indicate a murder on sight, but enough to say this was no random disappearance. The car was impounded. DNA testing was ordered. And by noon, a new word was added to Jamal Wright's file: homicide. Tasha got the news while sitting in the corner of the hotel restaurant, untouched plate of food in front of her. When she heard blood, she just nodded, as if her heart already knew. She clutched her stomach and whispered, "He never saw it coming." And she was right. But no one, not even Tasha, was ready for what they'd find next. Tension gripped the French Quarter like a vice. By the third day, the whispers were no longer quiet. Everyone had heard something. Everyone had a theory. The couple from Michigan in room 215 swore they saw Marcus and Jamal arguing near the ice machine. A bartender down the block said Marcus came in alone around 1:30 a.m., downed 2 shots of bourbon without saying a word, and left without paying. A street musician claimed he saw someone dragging a heavy object into a dark sedan around 4 a.m. The stories didn't match, but the fear was real. The African American community in New Orleans, already wary of how cases involving black victims often get handled, began rallying. Flyers went up overnight. Jamal's face printed beside the words. "Have you seen this man?" His church family back in Atlanta organized a prayer vigil via livestream. Local activists posted updates to social media every hour, demanding urgency, demanding answers. By now, Marcus Hale had been missing for nearly 48 hours. Detectives followed every possible lead. They searched his bank accounts, no withdrawals. His phone last pinged near the edge of the bayou, just outside city limits. Then silence. The device was either dead or destroyed. That night, officers canvassed the area. Flashlights slicing through thick reeds and cypress trees, boots sinking in the swampy grass. Mosquitoes bit through uniforms. Alligators watched from the shadows. And then, just past a thicket of brush, near a partially submerged log, they saw something. At first, it looked like a bundle of clothing. Then they saw the wrist. The body was waterlogged, face down, bound at the ankles with thin cord. The skin was bruised, and decomposition had already begun. But the tattoo on the shoulder confirmed what they already feared. Jamal Wright had been found. His wedding ring was missing. His left hand was bruised and broken, suggesting a struggle. A sliver of plastic was found under his fingernail, matching the broken phone case recovered earlier. He had fought hard. News hit the hotel within hours. Staff cried. One front desk worker quit on the spot. Tasha collapsed in the hallway. Her scream echoed off the marble floors. She didn't want to believe it, not until she saw him. But she didn't get to. The coroner advised against it. The damage was too severe. Back in Atlanta, his mother screamed into her hands as the news anchor said the words, "Foul play suspected." In New Orleans, murals had just begun to appear. Someone painted his smile on the corner of Chartres and Iberville, candles at the base. Locals gathered. Some cried. Some stood silent. The city, always buzzing, suddenly felt quiet. But the questions hadn't ended. In fact, they were just beginning. The next 24 hours moved like a wave, crashing one moment, silent the next. Marcus Hale was now the primary suspect in a homicide investigation. The man who once stood proudly beside Jamal on his wedding day was now the center of a manhunt. And yet, no one could find him. Tasha sat in a police interview room, her eyes hollow, fingers clenched around a coffee cup she hadn't sipped. The detective across from her asked questions gently but firmly. Did she know about the affair? How long had she suspected? Did Jamal ever mention fearing Marcus? Yes, she said softly. He said Marcus had started showing up unannounced, crying. Angry. He told me once he felt trapped. The detective nodded. The next lead came from a local rideshare driver. She remembered picking Marcus up 2 nights ago from near the warehouse where Jamal's car was found. She didn't think much of it, he seemed normal. But when she saw his face on the news, her stomach turned. He kept whispering to himself, she told police. Said something like, "I didn't mean for it to go like that." Meanwhile, Marcus's digital footprint was unraveling. On a hidden app folder in his iCloud account, police found dozens of unsent messages to Jamal. Some filled with longing, others with threats. One, dated a week before the wedding, simply said, "I don't think I can let you go." At 4:16 p.m., the breakthrough came. GPS data showed that before Jamal's phone went dead, it had pinged near the old St. Bernard Levee Road, an area notorious for being deserted, with few cameras and fewer witnesses. Nearby security footage from a closed convenience store caught a blurry image of a figure walking alone at dawn. Tall, hoodie up, limping slightly. It matched Marcus's build. A witness also reported seeing someone emerge from the woods and flag down a pickup truck just hours after the estimated time of Jamal's death. Detectives traced that truck. The driver was an elderly man who often offered rides to travelers. He remembered the man clearly, nervous, dirty, kept mumbling about things getting out of hand. He dropped him off just outside Baton Rouge. Police now knew Marcus was alive, possibly still in Louisiana, possibly armed. But it wasn't just about finding him anymore. It was about understanding him. Back at HQ, the lead detective stared at a wall covered in photos: Jamal, Tasha, Marcus. Smiles, handshakes, party shots. A triangle of trust that had collapsed under the weight of secrets, love, and shame. It begged the question, was this truly premeditated? Or did something in Marcus finally break? The nation was beginning to pay attention. True crime blogs picked up the story. A local paper ran the headline, "From Best Man to Fugitive." But behind the sensationalism was a haunting truth. The deeper they dug into Marcus's past, the darker things became. And no one was ready for what they were about to uncover. The footage came from a bar called Lyons, tucked between two antique shops just 3 blocks from the Belrose Hotel. Inside, it was dim and narrow, walls lined with vintage brass mirrors and faded Saints memorabilia. Security cameras weren't high-tech, but they worked. And what they captured at 12:41 a.m. on the night Jamal disappeared changed everything. The footage started ordinary: tourists, couples, laughter. Then Marcus entered, hoodie up, eyes darting. He sat at the bar and ordered a drink. His hands trembled. The bartender, later interviewed by detectives, said he barely spoke except to ask, "Has Jamal been here?" 10 minutes later, Jamal walked in. He didn't notice Marcus at first. He went straight to the end of the bar, scanned his phone. But when he spotted Marcus, head low, hand around his glass, he stiffened. He walked over. No hug. No handshake. Just 2 men standing too close, too tense. There was no audio, but the body language said everything. Marcus leaned in. Jamal stepped back. Marcus reached for his arm. Jamal pulled away. For a second, it looked like Marcus might cry. Then Jamal slammed his hand on the bar, said something sharp, and turned to leave. Marcus followed. The footage cut to the door, catching them both exiting into the warm, wet night. Outside, the street was nearly empty. Only one nearby camera caught them again, walking briskly, heads down, turning the corner toward the alley by Bienville Street. That was the last time either man appeared on any camera. Police played that footage on loop, trying to read lips, to track footsteps, to piece together a moment already gone. Back at the station, the lead detective asked a single question aloud to the task force. What broke him? That became the new focus. Not just who did it, but why. They searched Marcus's apartment back in Atlanta. Inside, they found journal entries, some just fragments. Many written in a spiral of emotion. He loved me, then left me. She took everything. I was nothing in that room. He said we had to bury it. But how do you bury yourself? What emerged was a portrait of a man consumed by contradictions, love and loathing, intimacy and invisibility, a desperate need to be chosen. The emotional depth rattled even seasoned investigators. He wasn't just hiding. He was unraveling. Back in New Orleans, the local community felt the ache more than anyone. These were their sons, their brothers, black men navigating impossible choices, caught between societal pressure, religious expectations, and the unbearable weight of silence. The footage didn't answer every question, but it confirmed one thing. This wasn't just a crime of passion. It was the final act of a heartbreak no one had seen coming. The call came in at 6:37 a.m. from a fisherman named Darrell Green. He had been checking his lines along the edge of the Bonnet Care Spillway, about 40 miles northwest of New Orleans, when he spotted something in the water. At first, he thought it was driftwood. Then he saw the foot, bare, bruised, and bound. Authorities arrived within the hour. The body was lodged under tangled branches, face down, arms floating outward in eerie surrender. Paramedics retrieved it carefully. The coroner confirmed what the world already feared. It was Jamal Wright. The wounds told their own story. There was bruising around his neck, defensive wounds on his arms, and blunt force trauma to the back of his head. The ligature marks suggested he'd been restrained before death. But what stopped investigators cold was what wasn't there: his wedding ring. Gone. Taken. Or discarded. Back at the morgue, the coroner noted an unusual injury, a deep gash across the palm of Jamal's right hand. It looked fresh, defensive, and within that wound, embedded under the skin, was a small shard of glass. It matched the broken whiskey tumbler found in room 311. It changed the timeline. Jamal had fought, not just outside but likely in the hotel, possibly in Marcus's room. Detectives began to theorize. Had Jamal confronted Marcus that night? Had he gone up to room 406, or had Marcus lured him into the empty room 311? Had the fight turned deadly before either man fully realized it? They couldn't say. Not yet. But the scene at the bayou confirmed one thing: Jamal hadn't drowned. He'd been killed, transported, and dumped. Hidden like a secret someone didn't want discovered. News of the body's recovery hit the media within minutes. And the city froze. Candlelight vigils sprang up across the French Quarter. Locals who barely knew Jamal wept openly in the streets. His students from the after-school program he helped fund back in Atlanta drew posters with messages like, "We love you, Mr. J." Tasha's face appeared on local television, pale and trembling. "He didn't deserve this," she said, voice cracking. "No matter what he didn't deserve this." She wore her ring. Still, back at the station, detectives prepared the arrest warrant. They'd charge Marcus Hale with second-degree murder. But he still hadn't been found. Then came the tip. An anonymous caller claimed they saw Marcus hitchhiking outside of Hammond, Louisiana. Dirty, disheveled, limping. He'd asked for directions to a train yard. The manhunt surged forward again. But for Tasha, for Jamal's mother, for the entire community, time had stopped. They weren't thinking about court dates or prison sentences. They were thinking about the silence Jamal left behind. His laugh. His touch. The way love, in its most tangled and broken form, had swallowed him whole. When they finally found Marcus Hale, he didn't run. He was sitting alone on a rusted bench inside a deserted train yard just north of Hammond. Hoodie soaked, hands raw, eyes hollow. He didn't speak when officers approached. Didn't resist when they cuffed him. He only asked one question. "Is he really gone?" The lead detective nodded. Marcus closed his eyes. A single tear rolled down his cheek. Then he said quietly, "He promised me this wouldn't happen." Back at the precinct, the interrogation began. At first, Marcus refused a lawyer. "I'll tell you everything," he said. "But you have to listen to all of it." And so they did. He began at the beginning, not the wedding, but years earlier. When he and Jamal first crossed that line. When friendship blurred. When secrets began. "We weren't just sneaking around," Marcus said. "We loved each other, even if he wouldn't say it out loud." He described their final days before the wedding. How Jamal panicked, tried to ghost him, then begged for silence. How Marcus, heartbroken and furious, agreed. But only under one condition: don't lie to her. Then came the honeymoon. Marcus claimed Jamal asked him to come to New Orleans. Said he needed closure. Said they could talk like men. But Marcus admitted he hoped for more. "I thought maybe deep down he'd finally choose me." He didn't. Marcus said the confrontation in room 311 wasn't planned. He showed up drunk, angry, told me I was ruining his life, called me a mistake. Marcus paused. That's when I lost it. What followed was rage. A shove. A punch. Glass breaking. Blood. "I didn't mean to kill him," Marcus whispered. "He fell. Hit his head. It all happened so fast." But detectives weren't sure they believed that version. Jamal's body had been bound. Moved. Hidden. That wasn't panic. That was intent. Marcus broke down during the second hour of questioning. Said he panicked after realizing Jamal wasn't breathing. Said he wrapped the body in hotel towels. Took the service elevator. Stashed him in the trunk of Jamal's rental. Drove for hours, crying the whole time. "I just wanted to disappear," he said. When asked about the missing wedding ring, Marcus hesitated. He took it off before the fight. Said it wasn't real. His voice cracked. "I kept it. Police never found the ring. Not in his bag. Not on him. Maybe he tossed it. Maybe he kept it hidden. No one knows." The confession was enough for prosecutors to file formal charges. Second-degree murder, tampering with evidence, unlawful disposal of a body. Bail was denied. As Marcus was led to holding, reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed. He didn't speak. Just stared ahead, silent, ruined. Back in Atlanta, Jamal's family gathered for a memorial. Tasha sat beside his mother. They held hands. No words. Only grief. Only the echo of what could have been. The courtroom was packed. People stood shoulder to shoulder in the gallery, some clutching tissues, others notebooks. Reporters lined the back wall. Every seat was filled with someone who wanted answers or closure. What unfolded wasn't just a trial. It was a public reckoning. Marcus Hale sat at the defense table in a pale gray suit, thinner now, pale, unmoving. He didn't look at the crowd. He didn't look at Tasha. He stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, eyes distant. The prosecution painted the picture clearly: premeditated murder. They argued Marcus traveled to New Orleans with motive and means, that he brought anger, jealousy, and resentment with him, and that he left with blood on his hands. They showed the security footage, the messages, the injuries, the gas station video, the disposal site. Each piece tightened the noose. But the defense didn't argue innocence. Instead, they painted a different picture: a man undone by pain, shame, and abandonment. A closeted relationship, hidden for years. A heart broken beyond recognition. They argued that Jamal's rejection, at the peak of what should have been the happiest week of his life, triggered a psychological break. That the killing wasn't planned. It was a tragic moment of uncontrolled emotion. They called it a crime of passion. Marcus didn't testify, but his statement, read aloud by his attorney, silenced the room. I never planned to hurt Jamal. I loved him more than I ever knew how to say. And he loved me. But we were both too afraid to live in the truth. I lost control. I took someone's son, someone's husband. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I hope, one day, I can forgive myself. It was raw, honest, and unsettling. The jury deliberated for 9 hours. In the meantime, outside the courthouse, protesters gathered. Some held signs demanding justice for Jamal. Others held signs that read, "Love is not a crime." A few shouted about how the justice system failed black men in every direction, failed them in life, and failed them in death. When the verdict came, the room froze. Guilty. Second-degree murder. Tasha wept silently. Jamal's mother whispered his name. And Marcus, still as a statue, closed his eyes, then opened them slowly, as if accepting what he already knew. Sentencing was swift, 35 years. No parole for 25. Some thought it was too lenient. Others thought it was harsh. But no one walked out feeling whole. The judge's final statement echoed in the chamber. This was not a case of evil. This was a case of unbearable pain, poor decisions, and a love that was never allowed to live in the light. But no matter the reason, the result remains the same. A life is gone, and nothing will ever bring it back. And just like that, it was over. At least legally. But in the hearts of those left behind, it was just beginning. The interview aired 3 weeks after the sentencing. Tasha Wright sat on a plain couch, hands clasped, hair pulled back tight, wearing a soft blue blouse that matched the stillness in her eyes. The room was quiet except for the hum of the cameras. Across from her sat the journalist, nodding gently, voice low. She didn't push. She didn't have to. Tasha was ready to talk. I wasn't just betrayed, Tasha began. I was erased. Every part of my life that felt stable, every truth I held close, it all dissolved. She recounted how she first met Jamal at a volunteer event. How they spent their weekends visiting bookstores and arguing over jazz albums. How Marcus was always around, present, loyal, trustworthy. He was like family, she said, her voice catching. So when it came time to plan the wedding, it wasn't even a question. Jamal said, "He's my brother." Then she paused. And now I wonder how many times I was standing in a room with both of them, completely blind to it. The interviewer asked if she ever suspected. No, Tasha said quietly. But I noticed how Jamal changed. Especially in the last year. He got quieter, jumpy, distant. But I chalked it up to stress. She described the moment she saw the message on the iPad. The shock. The confusion. My body froze. And then I read it again. And again. And I just knew, this wasn't just about infidelity. This was about identity. And lies. And pain. Tasha admitted something that made headlines the next day. She had known about the affair before the honeymoon. A week before the wedding, I found a photo on his laptop. Jamal asleep in Marcus's lap. It was intimate. And I confronted him. He begged. He cried. Said it was a mistake. Said it was over. So why go through with the wedding? I thought love could fix it, she said simply. I thought I could fix it. The public didn't know this part. The prosecution didn't mention it. It added a whole new weight to the story. That Tasha walked down the aisle with tears in her throat, with betrayal in her bouquet. That she smiled through photos while her heart begged for a different answer. The most powerful moment came at the end. The interviewer asked, "Do you forgive him?" Tasha closed her eyes. A long silence. Then, "I forgive Jamal, because I know he didn't mean to hurt me. He was just scared. Trapped. Torn between truth and expectation. I forgive him, and I pray he found peace." A tear rolled down her cheek. "But Marcus, I'm still working on that." The interview went viral. Millions watched it within 24 hours. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was real. Grief, betrayal, humanity, and the raw pain of a woman who lost her husband not once, but twice. The trial may have ended, but the ripple effects were far from over. In the weeks that followed Marcus Hale's sentencing, the story refused to die. Not on the news, not on social media, and certainly not within the hearts of the people it left shattered. In Atlanta, Jamal's memorial service brought over 200 people together. Teachers, co-workers, childhood friends. They packed into a community center draped in navy and gold, his favorite colors. His mother, Ms. Denise, spoke with a voice that cracked but never broke. "My son was more than a headline," she said. "He was gentle, smart, funny. He mentored kids who looked up to him like he was magic." She didn't mention Marcus by name. She didn't have to. In New Orleans, the Belrose Hotel saw cancellations. Guests whispered about the honeymoon suite murder. The owners quietly renamed the floor. Staff said the energy on the third floor never felt the same. One housekeeper refused to go back up there. "Something lingers," she said. "You can feel it." Meanwhile, the community continued to wrestle with the story's layers. Church leaders began hosting forums on sexuality, silence, and the suffocating pressure many black men face to perform roles that don't fit. LGBTQ+ advocates use Jamal and Marcus's tragedy to highlight the hidden lives people live in fear. Lives that can erupt in violence when shame festers too long. Some people painted Marcus as a monster. Others saw a broken man who never got the chance to live honestly. At Morehouse, where all three had once walked the same campus paths, students held a vigil on the steps of Graves Hall. Candles flickered in paper cups. A choir sang softly. One student read a poem titled, "Two Men in a Room the World Wouldn't Accept." Tasha stayed mostly out of the spotlight after her interview. She moved back in with her parents. Closed her classroom for the rest of the semester. A neighbor said she often sat on the porch, staring into the distance, holding a worn wedding photo. "She's not angry anymore," the neighbor whispered. "Just tired." Marcus began serving his sentence at Angola prison. He kept to himself, refused interviews, refused visits, but word spread that he'd taken up writing. A guard mentioned he filled spiral notebooks with poetry, prayers, letters to no one. Back in the French Quarter, the mural of Jamal remained. Someone added to it. Below his smiling face, they painted the words, "Truth buried is still truth, and love denied doesn't die, it just haunts." The mural became a place of gathering, a place to cry, a place to remember. And through it all, the question remained, whispering beneath the surface. What if they'd told the truth sooner? Would Jamal still be alive? The sun rose soft and golden over New Orleans, casting long, gentle shadows on the mural of Jamal Wright. Flowers lay at the base, some fresh, some wilted. A candle still flickered from the night before. Locals passed by quietly, some pausing to reflect, others shaking their heads, still trying to make sense of how a honeymoon became a funeral. This wasn't just a story about murder. It was a story about secrets, and how they spread like cracks through the walls we build around ourselves. Jamal Wright died with more than just a broken skull. He died carrying the weight of an identity he never felt safe enough to speak. A man split in two, one self for his wife, his family, his faith, and another for stolen moments in dimly lit rooms, with a man he once called his best friend. And Marcus Hale? He didn't walk into that hotel room as a killer. He walked in broken, desperate, convinced that love and honesty could never exist in the same space for men like him. In the courtroom, in letters, in silence, he made it clear he didn't plan it. But pain that deep doesn't always need a plan. The tragedy wasn't just in the killing. It was in everything that led to it. In a world that still tells black men to be invincible, heterosexual, untouchable, what happens to the ones who aren't? What happens when love defies the image? When fear is louder than truth? Jamal and Marcus both grew up in churches that taught them to hide. Families that loved them but expected silence. Communities that celebrated strength but punished softness. The crime was one of betrayal. But the wound was much older than any marriage. Even justice, as the jury defined it, felt messy. Yes, there was a conviction. Yes, Marcus will serve decades behind bars. But for those left behind, justice wasn't a gavel. It was a question that refused to die. What if the world had made space for them to love without shame? What if they hadn't had to lie? What if silence wasn't the only thing they knew how to share? Tasha eventually returned to work. Quietly, bravely. She now runs a grief support group for women widowed by violence. She doesn't speak of Jamal often, but when she does, she says this. He was good. Even in his worst mistake, he was good. He was just too afraid to live out loud. The mural still stands. Weathered now, but whole. And beneath it, scrawled in black ink by an unknown hand. Love isn't always a lie, but hiding it can kill you. Every story has two sides, but the truth waits in the shadows. Join us as we uncover the hidden truths, the unspoken betrayals, and the moments that define survival. Subscribe now to follow every twist and turn, because in the world of true crime, justice is just the beginning.